Welcome back to another episodes of Capes of Tights. Episodes of Capes and Tights? Yeah, episodes. We're doing multiple episodes of this one episode, Adam.
At the same time.
We're a pop culture and comic book podcast. I'm Justin. That's Adam over there. Back again to talk some comic book movies. So a little bit of pop culture and comic books in this one.
Without a doubt.
I mean, both mixed together. I think, so Adam and I talked about doing some reviews of these movies. One of my favorite podcasts out there is Friends from Work, dude. Like, they do a great job, and they went over the MCU as a whole over they started in 2019, but it really hit a stride in 2020 when the pandemic hit. I was able to listen to like every week they'd have a new episode out about covering one of these movies, and they did it in this specific watch order. And I was like, that's badass. I didn't want to copy that. I think like we're a different podcast. I didn't want to like copy that specific format. Then I was like, how do we do this? And I was like, well, maybe, I mean, there's a lot of these movies have been out. There's 20 something movies now in the MCU. So a lot of these movies have been out long enough, and there's been multiple sequels that we can do like groups like Iron Man movies and Thor movies and Captain America movies. And I thought to myself, what better place to start than the original MCU movie, and that's Iron Man. So
definitely,
I think I told Adam, I was like, let's watch these. It's fun. I do think that Iron Man has now been the most watched movie in the MCU for me, just because of the number of times I've rewatched the entire series over again, and now doing this. So I think Iron Man is now one of those ones. So when I put it on, I'll tell you, I'll be honest, Adam, I was like, I gotta watch this movie. And not in a I don't like the movie way, but more of along the lines of like, I know everything that happens in this movie.
Exactly. And I was the opposite. Like, I hadn't seen it in ages, so it was fun to watch them again. I probably haven't seen the original Iron Man since it came out.
I think it was one of the first movies in my lifetime. I mean, let's see, 2008, I would have been 22 years old. And I think it was the first movie in a long time, anyway, that I went back to the theater to see the movie over again. So like in my lifetime, it's always been like, I could barely afford, under 22, you barely afford a ticket to go to the movies. And so like for me to actually buy multiple tickets to see it multiple times was a telltale sign to what the future would entail for me in my lifetime.
Definitely.
The MCU would be a very integral part of my lifetime from 2008 until today or in beyond. But so we're going to talk all three movies. I think I'm excited. Iron Man 1, 2, and 3. It's funny. I did some research on these. I know Iron Man 1 came out in 2008 and Iron Man 3 came out in 2013. Yep. I don't remember when Iron Man 2 came out, and that's my fault. I should have looked that up before I just got on the air. But Iron Man 1, $140 million budget, made almost $600 million. Iron Man 2, $185 million budget-ish, made $624 million. And the big one, Iron Man 3, $200 million budget, made $1.215 billion in the box office. So the total franchise, so if you just put Iron Man as its own franchise, made almost $2.5 billion combined through the three films. It is staggering that Iron Man, a movie that Marvel and all the people, the executives out there basically passed on for the longest time because it was such an odd thing, that they were able to make $2.5 billion on these movies. I mean, Disney paid $4 billion for
it's crazy.
Marvel in the first place, and they made half of that money back with these three films.
That was like the greatest buy of all time.
Oh.
I still find that staggering that they got it for that cheap. Well, you said it back to a point you made, which is funny. A good starting off point too is I still felt like I really appreciated him more this time, but Iron Man was a weird start for the whole MCU. And like now it makes perfect sense, right? And it fits in and it's got its full circle. But I was trying to watch these as I would have the first time. And I was still like, Iron Man, why Iron Man? But it works really well.
Yeah. And it's funny because, when they started the architecture of the MCU, Iron Man obviously started the whole thing off. But I don't know for truth. I never really talked to like the executives at Marvel and Disney, but like, was Iron Man's storyline intertwined through all of the 23 MCU movies up to Phase 3 it started recently until he passed away? Obviously, spoiler alert. Was he supposed to be originally such an integral part, or did it become that after the fandom of it and so on? Because any person now who wasn't alive in 2008, I mean, a 13-year-old kid can watch this movie and not have been alive when this movie came out, or even when they were super young, like if they were like born in 2004, 2005. watches this whole thing, it's just like, oh yeah, Iron Man's the first film. He's an integral part in the MCU. But at the very beginning, like you mentioned, was everybody's like, Iron Man. Why would the hell would you start with Iron Man? I mean, Captain America, Hulk,
Yep.
the Fantastic Four, X-Men. Obviously, they couldn't use those two back in the day. Those are the things that you think you'd start with. Iron Man.
I know, and it's funny. I actually like really thought about that when I was first watching it, and then I was like, well, by the end, the third one, which we'll get to later, but rewatching, I kind of did appreciate it because it starts with someone who has no powers. Like,
Yes.
They didn't use a super serum. They weren't like, they don't have a chip in their brain. And so I think as a viewer, it drew people in as kind of like the Tony Stark
Yes.
lens was what they looked through, because they actually do a good job of like how the then subsequent experiences change him. And, which makes him a good starting character, because we would all be the ones that one day were like, oh, okay. So I liked it watching it.
Thinking about it as a comic book overall thing too, and you relate it. I mean, who's Iron Man always in the same conversation really with a DC, Iron Man, Batman. They're kind of like the people that are like the billionaire, boys, the billionaire men who fight crime but don't have any superpowers. They have suits and gadgets and things like that allow them to have those superpowers that they appear to have from people. And what I will say, and this is going to be my Marvel, bias coming out, but Batman needs someone else. If we're just talking about movies here. We're talking movies today. So like, I know that I'm going to make some relations to comic books, but I'm just going to talk movies alone. Batman needs someone else to build the gadgets and come up with the ideas really for the gadgets that he has. Whereas Iron Man, I realized when I'm watching Iron Man 1 that he can do it himself. Like, he's an actual MIT grad. He actually has, he graduated in the comic book wise. He graduated in 2021, I mean, from MIT. And so like, he has that ability to actually physically weld and do the mechanic part of his suits and actually do this. Whereas it seems like Batman needs his underground people who know he's Batman to help create his suits and his tools and things like that, which was one small tweak that I kind of liked, that like Iron Man was the rally car racer of the racing world, whereas like F1 racers need someone else to change their tires, whereas rally car racers, they get a flat tire on the course, they change them themselves. And so that I like about Tony Stark and Iron Man.
Well, and I think that right there is a big one too, is like, I don't know at what point it happens, but early on, everybody knows who Iron Man is too. So that's a big difference from Batman, who, does everything to hide his.
Well, in the comic books, he didn't really have his identity known until later on. They did do that in the movies, and that was kind of a last minute thing. I think I read online that it wasn't really supposed to happen. That he just basically like at the end of like, well, what if he says, "I am Iron Man"? It was kind of like an ad-libbed thing, and it was like, well, that's perfect.
I think it was smart.
Yes, I think so too, because there's too many hidden identities.
Character apart. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And I think having someone they can go in completely different. You don't have to worry about the Peter Parker of the world where you're trying to hide your identity the entire time, and you're afraid someone's going to find out, and oh no, this girlfriend's going to find out, and all this other stuff. It's like they can just make it who it is and what it is.
Yeah, because as soon as you said that, that's kind of interesting, because that always ends up becoming a huge part of any character's story, is how they hide their identity. And then you always think like, we probably could be doing something way more interesting if we just, like you said, started with like, who is Tony Stark? Go. And otherwise, I don't know that maybe it would have been as big as it was if they hadn't have leaned heavy on Tony Stark as really the character.
Because Iron Man has the same flaws as Tony Stark in the world. So like you see it throughout the three films that he deals with his own struggles, and the struggles that Tony Stark deals with are also struggles that Iron Man deals with, because they're one and the same. Whereas you see, if you didn't know who Tony Stark was, or was Iron Man, you'd see Iron Man as this perfect person, and you don't know the life struggles they're going through. Like when Spider-Man goes through that in his story arcs in comic books and the movies, he deals with his high school drama. But then you see Spider-Man, you're like, Spider-Man's a perfect superhero. Why would he need these struggles? When you announce that Tony Stark is Spider-Man at the end of the first film, you now know that any struggles that Tony Stark deals with, also Iron Man is dealing with. So it's another line of storyline you can use throughout the whole films. But so I mean, so Robert Downey Jr. obviously plays Spider-Man, or Iron Man. I did that this morning too when I was doing our the poll list thing. I kept on saying the wrong thing, and I was like, "What the hell?" So, starring Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts, Don Cheadle / Terrence Howard, and we can work into that in a second here with the first film in the second film. Jon Favreau, who directed the first two films, also starred in all three of them as Happy Hogan. Jeff Bridges was in the first one, which is awesome. Scarlett Johansson, Sam Rockwell, Mickey Rourke, Sam Jackson were all in the second one. Guy Pearce, Stephanie Zozak, whatever. I forget her. I don't know how to say her name, but it was in the third one. Ben Kingsley, as well as James Badge Dale was also in the third one, and then so on and so on and so on. Reason I read that all off is, Adam, is I will say from the beginning, the first Iron Man movie, Marvel has kicked ass at casting.
Oh, I think we've argued in past. I mean, it's the best casting for the long game. I mean, ever.
It's unbelievable. And now Tony Stark, as Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, was originally not going to work because Marvel thought he was too old. He's like, well, he is too old, but he's like, they wanted to do what they did basically, which is have him continue on through the storyline.
Yep.
To 23 films, have him be around. That's 23 plus or whatever, not 23 plus years, but it's been 10 years. Yep. A person that's too old at the first movie is going to be way too old by the last movie. And so they were able to, obviously he was able to stay young enough to be a good good Tony Stark.
Yep.
But they didn't want him. He was too old originally. I heard Tom Cruise originally was up for the role too.
Ooh,
I was like, how is Robert Downey Jr. too old, but Tom Cruise is not?
Oh man, I can't even. I'll have to wrap my head around that later. Iron Man with Tom Cruise.
I'm glad it wasn't because Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man. That's the stupid thing about it. It's the same thing with Samuel L. Jackson, which I had on that list. I don't know where he went, but Samuel L. Jackson, he did have it in there. As the Ultimate Universe's version of Nick Fury was perfect as well. So there's certain roles that are just like, you couldn't have anybody else play these roles. Like you can't. It's the same thing with Harry Potter now, though. Like it wouldn't go back and see him not playing Harry Potter. Like that's not Harry Potter.
Exactly.
It's the Marty McFly of Back to the Future. No one else can play Marty McFly than him. So I'm glad that they chose him as the character. But again, going back to casting, it was like, in the first movie, Jeff Bridges was amazing in that movie. Gwyneth Paltrow was amazing. Terrence Howard was kind of a miss, in my opinion. I'm kind of glad. I like Don Cheadle a lot better as Rhodey than Terrence Howard. I think Terrence Howard is kicking himself now.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because of like how much money has Don Cheadle now made off of it. And Don Cheadle, I believe, is now going to be in the Armor Wars TV show. It's going to be on Disney Plus too. So now he's going to get his own TV show in a sense. So like, I don't remember what else Terrence Howard's been in since Iron Man 1.
No, that would be really disappointing to have missed that opportunity. It is funny. I hadn't seen Iron Man in so long. I forgot that it wasn't Don Cheadle.
Yeah.
And so it didn't connect with me that it was, is he Captain Rhodes, whatever, something Rhodes.
Yeah.
I forget his rank, but until like way too far into the film. And then I was like, oh, that's Don Cheadle's character, because like you said, now it's Don Cheadle, not him.
Yeah. And we'll go into movie 2 in a second, but in movie 2, I realized that they, at one point when Colonel Rhodes goes into the deposition, whatever he was had for the in front of Congress, he says, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here." And he goes, "Yeah, it's Captain." He says the name to his face, like we would know if Terrence Howard walked in as audience that we know who that was, but like Robert Downey Jr. says his full name and to them so that we all would know. Okay, the characters changed, but we know it's the same person, kind of thing. And I was like, that's kind of funny. It's like it was like almost a nod at the fact that it's been a replaced character, but we should know it's the same person.
Yeah.
Without just trying to roll into it. It was kind of funny, kind of like breaking the fourth wall, kind of like, hey guys, this is a new person, but we're gonna look past that. The original storyline, though, in the comic book was based in a more of a Chinese culture, that he was abducted and so on, and Yinsen helped him build the suit, the original suit, and all that stuff was Chinese.
Right.
I definitely think one of my favorite parts about this whole thing was bringing it to Afghanistan and bringing it into a more modern times, made it relatable to the point where I've always loved about the real world design of Marvel, that I actually think, like, if you were young enough and naive enough, you go, Iron Man really exists. He was part of the war over in Afghanistan, and that's where he got his, his suit and all that stuff. If it would have been in China, I don't know if it would have been as impactful.
I agree.
On current times.
Actually, I thought it was interesting looking back to see it starting in Afghanistan, and that there's a big theme about whether or not, in fact, I think it's Colonel Rhodes that talks about it, whether or not these weapons should be autonomous or they should have a pilot. And then that, of course, becomes like kind of the whole Iron Man thing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's when we're having like serious conversations about drones in the US. And so, yeah, it was weird to see that and be like, wow, I hadn't seen that they were connecting this to like drones and Afghanistan. So,
and like I said, just bringing it more modern, bring it to more like lifelike thing that you can actually think that it could happen with, Spider-Man being in New York City, or like maybe if I'm young enough, when I was young, maybe if I go to New York City, I'll see Spider-Man sweeping around. It's the same thing by bringing it to 2008. I mean, we're deep in the middle of the war on war over in the Middle East, and having that be part of that influence in this thing was awesome. I love Jensen, the guy who helps him in the cave. That guy's awesome. Again, jumping around a little bit, he makes another appearance in third movie when they're in Switzerland. So it's supposed to be that the first movie is supposed to take place obviously after the beginning of the third movie, because they go back in time. And so I remember had mentioned in the first movie that he had met Jensen at a Switzerland conference, and they put the Switzerland conference at the beginning of movie 3, and you see him there, which is like, I love that kind of like connection and throwback and the connectivity of all of it. I think he was great. His name's Sean Tube. He was awesome. I love that. So it's definitely the best origin story in Marvel, like in the Marvel movies, like the movies, filming, the casting, the directing, the acting, the storyline. I just like the best out of all the so far have been done origin story movies, the solo origin films with one character. I mean, I like Guardians of the Galaxy, but let's be honest, it's a team origin film. So it's kind of like on the borderline there of an actual origin story. But Robert Downey Jr.'s story for Tony Stark and Iron Man, I think, is the best one so far, in my opinion, if I had to rank my origin story films.
Yeah, and because I think too, now looking back, it's especially to see like how much Iron Man changed even in the course of the movies. Like he's so much more powerful at the end, and I mean both in control of himself and the technology. And like watching it again from the beginning, he was a very different character in the beginning in the MCU.
Oh yeah, yes. He when he gets abducted, it's like he has that change of heart, like where a weapons manufacturer doesn't make weapons anymore. And he's like, but he needs to have accountability. And it's like he's trying to portray that the company needs accountability, but he also realizes that he needs accountability, that he's just been flying by the seat of his pants as well. And now he needs to put himself in check. And he kind of uses the company as a scapegoat almost. But then like you can see as the movies progress 1, 2, and 3 that he is becoming more accountable for himself. And I do realize that what it would be like to be a billionaire is fascinating. If he wasn't a billionaire, there's no way he could have done that. Even if he had the smarts to build that original suit in that cave, he wouldn't have been what Iron Man was at the end of Endgame without the billions of dollars backing. So
which I mean, like, I did think watching this movie, like, let's talk about that scene for a second, but like that was a big ask to believe that he made that suit in that cave in like, I forget how long it was, but it wasn't that long.
No.
And so I felt like I suspended a bit more disbelief in that than I do with like Spider-Man getting bitten by a radioactive spider. Cause like, I don't know, maybe that would work, but man, building that thing in that cave was impressive.
Well, there's that. And then there's the thing that I complained to Taylor when we were watching this too. And it's one of those pet peeves that I have over movies that I absolutely love, but I have pet peeves of, is when Jeff Bridges pulls out his, the arc reactor out of his chest. He doesn't know, like they can't figure the technology out to make it smaller. That's one of my favorite lines in Marvel, by the way, is when Jeff Bridges gets all mad at the other guy working on the deck, and he's like, Tony Stark figured out how to do this with scraps or whatever, in a cave. And it was like, such a great. Jeff Bridges is amazing, but he has a tool to remove from Tony Stark's chest.
Exactly.
The arc reactor, but doesn't know the size of it, doesn't know anything about the thing, and has a specific tool to remove it from Tony Stark's chest. And I'm just like, well, where do you get the information for that? Like, where do you get the specs to make the removal tool?
What? And he's getting ready to use it.
Yes.
So I feel like on the other end, he's already got something ready to go for it. So
it locks in, the connector attaches.
Exactly.
Because there's no one else, no engineers are in that building letting him create Ironmonger. It's just him So those are the kind of things where you're like, okay, you got to believe this is a movie. This is superheroes. So you got to suspend belief for a second there, because it's definitely unbelievable in that moment. What I do think that the suspension of belief has gone away is most movies you see this. Like they did it in Spider-Man pretty well, like the original Spider-Man's like 1, 2, and 3, and then the second one with Andrew Garfield is training to use the abilities that you now have.
Yes.
Whereas like other superhero movies and other movies that something crazy happens to someone, all of a sudden out of nowhere, they know how to use these abilities.
Yes.
You see it in the kids movies where the kid gets the surgery on his arm. What's it called? Rookie of the Year. And all of a sudden I know he knows how to throw fastballs, but he knows how to throw them with aim with no problem.
Exactly.
Like it's just all, it's these things that, you're automatically good at it. It shows him training in his garage. Like, okay, 1% thrust, and 2% thrust. And he goes and he does it. And finally he goes, okay, screw this, and just goes out and flies. But like, he has to train to use the ability. So I'm glad they don't suspend that belief, that you actually shows that he got this suit and now he has to pretend to know how to use it. And same thing when he flew away with the suit in the cave and he crash landed. It's like, okay, he's not perfectly automatically knowing how to use this suit that he came up with in 10 seconds to make.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. They show him mess up a ton. Mm-hmm. So that's even by the third movie, he still has design flaws that he's trying to work out with the suits. And so,
because I mean, technically, they don't have that with Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges gets in the Ironmonger suit and just knows how to use it. Do you know what I mean? He finally has this power, this arc reactor, and bam, he knows how to use it. He's flying up and doing all these things, and you're like, where did Jeff Bridges learn how to do all this stuff? But Tony Stark had to like spend a week or a couple of days building the suit in his basement and doing all this other stuff. What I will say is that when he actually puts the Iron Man suit on and flies out of his house in Malibu Point and flies out of the sky and sees that go, it was pretty cool. And then one of my favorite shots in all of Marvel movies is consistent is the shot of us looking into his helmet.
Yes.
And it's like showing his head looking around. It's all dark and they've got the screens in front of it. That's one of the most badass things. I think it's like, it makes me believe that there's a camera inside of his helmet. It's really cool. And it's funny. Well done.
I had never realized how much Jarvis was there from the beginning. Like that's just one of those details at the time. Of course, you're not even really paying attention to. And I mean, it's right there from the beginning. So I thought that was, and was it Paul Bettany? I thought
from the beginning. Yeah. So I have that as a note here. Jarvis turns out to be Vision, obviously, again, spoilers. For anybody who hasn't seen the Marvel Cinematic Universe or listened to this podcast, you're questioning your life choices. But he wasn't expected to be there for the long run. I mean, Paul Bettany was basically after Iron Man, must have been after Iron Man 3-ish. He was basically done with acting. He was almost out of Hollywood. He was just like, I'm just done. I'm retiring. And it wasn't until someone contacted him and asked him if he wanted to be the voice of Vision or Jarvis, then become Vision in Ultron, that he got back, and he ended up getting his own TV show and multiple movies and all that stuff, which is really cool. So yeah, from Paul Bettany from the beginning was Jarvis. But he didn't. And the cool thing about the adaptation for the movie, it's Jarvis was a computer, and in the actual comic book, Jarvis is an actual person. He's actually Tony Stark's butler. So I like that aspect of it, making it more digital, because Tony Stark wouldn't have had a butler. I'm sorry. He has cleaning people that come in there and people to do things for him. He's got an assistant, but I just don't picture Tony Stark, the character we see in the MCU, having a butler. Like it just looks old school and weird. And plus, they probably MCU also probably wanted to differ themselves from Batman too.
Exactly.
Because I mean, that's just
from what we see. I mean, it seems like Tony Stark to be there, like never leaves his lab anyways. So like, he doesn't really need a butler, and he has robots. So
yeah, exactly. And so I think the first movie was great. And like I said, the whole training exercises jokes were funny when they did the planes in the air, and then they used it again at the end. They were going to say it was a training exercise, and then he ends up just breaking loose and goes, I am Iron Man. And the Iron Man song plays and all that stuff. And the storyline, the story arc was great. Like I said, Jeff Bridges was amazing in the first movie. Gwyneth Paltrow kicked ass. Tony Stark obviously was awesome. Jon Favreau was funny as Happy. I loved him. I think his directing is amazing. It was funny. We watched most of these movies over the weekend again. And yesterday, Sunday, we did our date night, Taylor and I, and we watched the movie Chef and made a sandwich based off of the movie and so on and so forth. We laughed. We go, technically yesterday wasn't Chef date night. It was the Jon Favreau date night, because we watched Chef, which he wrote, directed, produced, and acted in, and he directed and acted in Iron Man. I'm like, we just had this Jon Favreau weekend. I know next thing I need to do is just watch like The Lion King he did, or Made, the old movie that he was in with back in the day. But But yeah, so Jon Favreau kicked ass. I think he was excellent. Iron Man is up there with my favorite movies in the MCU. It's definitely well done. So
Yep.
Iron Man
I
1
gotta
will go
say,
down in history.
rewatching it, I was impressed from the beginning. And even going in, kind of already saying to myself, like, oh, this is going to feel dated. It's going to be not. And it was great.
I mean,
I was shocked at the details that I didn't notice in the beginning.
there's definitely things, and Taylor pointed out, she's the one who always points out special effects. I mean, obviously 2008 special effects compared to 2021
Exactly.
special effects are different. They were well done. I think it was great. I think some of the ways that his suit goes on and stuff like that was all innovative and cool. Definitely not
Yep.
a movie you could make the same way you couldn't have made this in the 70s or 80s. There's no way. This movie had to be made in modern times because the technology is there to do
Yep.
special effects and all that stuff. So I'm excited to see where it goes from here. I mean, it's insane
Yep.
what they can do now. But yeah, it was so cool. I mean, obviously it did so well. They wanted to make Iron Man 2, and that was both, Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2 were both part of Phase 1.
Yep.
And so they were part of the original movies that came out before the Avengers movie, or right around the Avengers movies. So it obviously did well enough, and again, it was a risk. It was a big risk to have done and make that movie.
It still feel like watching it again, it still felt like a huge risk. Like the whole movie, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you led with this. Like it's good, but it's not, like you said, it's not Spider-Man that has immediate appeal to everybody. It's not Batman. It's like most people would be like, I remember my brother used to read Iron Man back in the day.
But I'm wondering whether Batman, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, for example, is a big one. Why nothing's ever been successful is because the Fantastic Four as a group in Marvel Comics is held to such high standards. When you make a movie, nothing's going to be good enough. And the same thing I felt like if the Star Wars movies were not made, like if the Star Wars movies originally started as a comic book and you try to make them now, they may not be as loved as they are now because they were, it's like one of those things when they try to make the new Star Wars movies, you're not living up to the old Star Wars movies. And it's like you put on this pedestal, you just can't get it off. And starting with Iron Man was a risk because no one knew it, but in the same sense, they couldn't fail at the character. They could fail at the movie and the box office and all that stuff. Like, how could you fail a character that no one gave a shit about? Like you there was nothing. I couldn't go up to watching Iron Man and be like, it's not like the comic books because no one read the comic books. So it's like it was this character that no one really cared about. I mean, he was there and people did like him, but like, and that's why I think they did Iron Man and then they did Hulk, because it's like, okay, if we do Iron Man and it did Hulk, and I guess what was I reading somewhere online that the Hulk movie, which came out a few months later, if they had waited a year to do that movie would have been completely different. They said that there was so much stuff that they learned that they did well in Iron Man that they didn't do in Hulk.
Yeah.
That if they would have waited just a little bit longer to start it, that they may have the Hulk might have been not one of the worst movies in the MCU, it would have been one of the better movies in the MCU because of the things they learned from doing Iron Man well. And so, like I said, I don't know if they were ever planning on doing an Iron Man 2, but they got one out of it because of how well Iron Man 1 did for sure. So, I guess we can move on a little bit to Iron Man 2 unless you have anything else. We obviously can talk back on it if we need to. Iron Man 2, again, but the first thing I noticed is just a generic life point. I would love to see something like the Stark Expo / World's Fair again. Like we didn't get to see that as in our generation. Like something to do like some sort of big park or like do it all over the world in different spots, but just have like technology and innovation and just a year-long some sort of event that you could just like not have to worry about going to a weekend event or some sort of expo somewhere, but like it's a year long and things happen all year. I think that would be badass. I think we could see it happen again in the future. I think it'd be fun.
Hey man, and when people are done with the pandemic, who knows? We might get all kinds of new stuff like year-long world fairs. I'd be down for it.
You could do like music festivals to go along with it. That like every couple of months is a different music festival that's there.
Yeah.
Like VR technology and computer technology and all this other stuff. Like Apple has their own week to announce all their Apple products, and Google has their own week, and each month or whatever, you just have 12 different major businesses. I think it'd be badass. Watch it all online or go visit or whatever. I think it'd be really cool. I don't know how well
should do it. Like should share the city that the Olympics is in. That way you've already got some infrastructure there after the Olympics are done, and you can use their stadiums and see, we're brilliant. We've got great ideas.
You know how expensive it would be to put that on?
for a
You'd have
year.
so much money. Yeah.
When
But
you
yeah,
look
I
back
think
where they would build entire buildings, now you can
it's,
imagine the cost of that. Like, oh my gosh.
yes. And I'm always like I say, World's Fair or Stark Expo. People were coming from like the
Yep.
World's Fair is like people were coming not from the world. Let's be honest. How easy it is to travel right now. They would be inundated with people from all over the
Oh
world
yeah.
because of how easy it is. But yeah, I think it was pretty cool. And starting off with that and having that whole like bring back his dad's reputation back into the light
Yep.
and do it again and all that stuff. Again, amazing casting. Holy crap, Justin Hammer, dude. I think he's one of my favorite characters. I think in all of Marvel movies right now. Sam Rockwell playing Justin Hammer.
Yeah.
I think he was just like this arrogant, douchey, cocky, like the side of Tony Stark that's there, but Tony Stark has a heart change, whereas like Justin Hammer is just arrogant and all
Yep.
about the bottom dollar and will do anything to stay ahead. I loved it. I ended up going to buy, I think, Justin Hammer's first appearance in the comic books for like a couple bucks because no one gives a crap about it because of Sam Rockwell's
Yep.
interpretation of him as an actor. I think it was great.
It was good. The second one was definitely, I don't,
Yes.
not my least favorite of the three, but it's the one for some reason I don't think about a lot.
Yes. I
Like even
agree.
having just watched it, I'm kind of like Iron Man 2. That was
Mm-hmm.
more Iron Man.
Yes.
Like,
Well, and so this is the biggest thing that I hear, and I agree with this statement and out there is Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2 are a carbon copy with a couple few changes done to them in the
exactly.
story, like in the base storyline. Like the
Right.
idea that it's someone, Iron Man has a suit, and now his villain has a version of his suit to
Right.
fight. So he's fighting himself. Someone stealing his technology or stealing his idea, and now he's fighting that person. So you have Ironmonger and you have Whiplash. It's
Yep.
one of those. It's there's too many times like that's the same thing that happened with Hulk. Hulk fights a guy, Abomination, that's like him,
Yep.
and so it's these the repetitiveness of comic books that people don't
Yeah.
like. And they just carbon copied it like, oh, we did really well on number one. Let's do number two. And it's again, technology is the iron. Oh my God, I can't believe you have technology like mine and that kind of stuff. And so the Whiplash is too similar to Iron Man in this version of it that just made me go, okay, it's just the same thing again. Again, I'll watch anything that has any of these characters in it because I love Marvel movies. But it did go to the point where I was like, that villain was too similar to the Ironmonger.
Yep.
And so
Um,
it also has almost one of the almost cringeworthy scenes I have in all of Marvel movies, and that's the birthday party scene where he's like drunk and acting like an
yes.
idiot and all that
Yep.
stuff, and he's dying, and so he doesn't care and all that stuff. And that's the part every time I put the movie on, I'm like, oh, I put the first seconds of the movie on, I'm like, I am not looking forward to that part of this movie. And for some reason, I just don't like it because I like Tony Stark so much. I'm like, stop being an idiot.
I guess, I mean, again, it's one of those ones it works so well with Robert Downey
Mhm.
Jr. too, though. So like, I feel like you had to see a bit of that side. It does, because again, he grows a ton over the course of the movies. So I guess as a start, but yeah, I totally agree. That's why that one's just kind of there, and I liked it. But I don't have any, like I said, it just kind of feels like the first one with new characters. The second one, though, is even now I'm trying to remember. That's the one where we get our first like big hint ending, though, right?
Yes.
After the credits, yeah.
Yes.
Which I don't know why I'm pretending spoilers because it's where they find Thor's hammer.
Yes.
So I mean that's a small part of the movie, but it was that moment of like watching it again where I was like, oh man, those reveals were always so awesome the first time.
Mm-hmm. And it's that going linearly when you watch the movies and they have these small things that go back to it. When you see those post-credit scenes or the you don't know about the post-credit scene obviously when you're watching the movie for the first time.
Yep.
But they make all those statements like, I've got bigger problems in the Southwest region, and that's the hammer coming down, and Coulson saying something, saying he's got to go deal with something else, so he can't help you anymore after the first movie. It's because again, they're hinting at the future of Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it doesn't register at the moment. It's just, okay, he's leaving, whatever. Samuel L. Jackson's just talking about the Southwest region. You don't know it's the Southwest of the United States. And when you go forward and watch the Thor movies or watch the post-credit scene, you're like, now that makes sense. And watching them over again, you get all those little Easter egg type things again, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's those post-credit scenes are they are the ones that really started it, honestly. Is this whole the Avengers Initiative was on the first one and all that
Oh yeah.
stuff. Like
I mean,
uh
you got to have a good plan if you're going to do those kind of teaser endings. And I think like whenever you see that in a movie that you know is not going to get a sequel, it's always
mhm.
so sad to like watch that, see them write a really great post-credit scene, but you're like remember like Chronicles of Riddick type
Yeah.
movies where you're like, this is never going to happen. This is never going to happen.
Mhm.
But with Marvel, yeah, now it's like it's a part of the whole thing. It's like waiting for Christmas Day at the end to see like what's it going to be.
And if you ever see the end of these movies coming, you'll stop seeing post-credit scenes because you're like, okay, they actually don't know if Disney's going to approve this next movie, so we really can't get
Right.
into that yet. And like phases will start going away and all that stuff. Um, because it's definitely happened in movies. It's definitely like the one thing I mentioned about this. I didn't see Dune yet, but the new Dune movie that came out, I guess it's only part one of the book. And someone said that's risky as hell because if the movie flopped, then you wouldn't actually get the conclusion of the book that you should have been
Right.
putting in the movie in the first place. So it's like it's a risk some people have to take. And I think Marvel's been able to do that with these movies because they don't have to tell the entire story in this one thing. Like the
Exactly.
Samuel L. Jackson part of this movie or the Scarlett Johansson part of this movie is a very small part of this movie, but they have such longer stories to tell in the MCU overall. I
Yep.
mean, it's technically the introduction of Black Widow. It's like it's semi quasi her origin film in Marvel.
Yep.
I mean, obviously it's not the Black Widow movie, but it's like this is where you find out who she is. She's undercover, and then she still one of my favorite scenes in this movie is when she gets changed in the backseat of the car, and Happy
Yep.
Hogan almost crashes the car because she's like, pay attention to the road because she's like in her bra in the back seat, and then
Yep.
she gets out of the car and she starts walking to the front door and he's like, what are you wearing? And they get inside and Happy punches that one dude and he's still fighting that dude when she kicks everybody else's ass.
Yep.
And he looks up and he goes, got him. And he's just all these bodies on the ground. Someone's hanging
Yep.
from the ceiling. I'm like, that's the
His
epitome of
character. His
Black Widow.
character's great.
Oh, and he wrote himself. I mean, that's basically he directed
Yeah.
himself into that character, and he ends up going on to. He was in the Spider-Man movies, and he's been actually
Yep.
Happy Hogan has been in more movies than a lot of other
He
superheroes.
kills me in the Spider-Man movies. Like his interactions when he's basically babysitting Peter is just cracks me up.
Well, isn't this the movie too? I think I wrote it down. Maybe I didn't. Oh, it's in the second. It's in the next movie, so I'll bring it up again in the next movie. But like the Happy Hogan of his humor and his acting is funny as hell.
Yep.
In this movie. Speaking of Spider-Man, so when they're doing the flying around, is that kid that has the spider or the Iron Man face on, and the drones think it's Iron Man, so they go after it, and he uses the fake pulsar thing. The rumor has always been, the speculation has always been that the idea wasn't ever written into the actual credits or anything like that. That's actually Peter Parker.
That's funny.
That kid going to New York City. The kid going there all by himself.
Yep.
And it's like, trying to be a superhero. And that they said that that's actually Peter Parker as a younger kid. And that's his actual first interaction with Iron Man, was not in
Which
the
is,
Spider-Man movies. And
interesting.
And even if they retro did that, like even if it was a, rewrite of the history, like, right. That character doesn't have a name. There's no actual person, like there's no connectivity to it. And then in the Spider-Man movies, the connectivity between Iron Man and Spider-Man, you're like, thinking back on it, actually, the first interaction they had was at the World's Fair, or the Stark Expo, and
that'd be cool.
That'd be awesome. Like that makes sense. I'm okay with it. They never planned it that way, but they went back and retro did it. I'm okay with that because I love that. Story arc.
It makes sense with their storyline. I mean,
yes.
So yeah.
The other cringeworthy part, in a sense, is that the DJ at Tony Stark's birthday party is DJ AM, who ended up passing away. So every time we watch that movie now, he's like, hit it, DJ AM. And I'm like, oh, that guy's dead. Like, that's not good. But the pissing in the soup story. People always wonder where do I go to the bathroom? Or how do you go to the bathroom? Like that. But
that thing's got a fully functional system for going to the bathroom.
Yeah. The storyline of him dying or about to die.
Yep.
Kind of also, when you look back at the whole body of work of the phase 3 or 3 phases, the idea that we eventually will lose Iron Man in these movies was kind of cool. Like it's like looking back on it, it's like, he could have died in movie 2 if he didn't get discover the element part of it. Those are all cool. Obviously, the Easter egg with the shield, he uses the shield to level out the pipes.
Yep.
And he goes, who was it? Coulson's like, you know what this is? He goes, I need that. And he grabs it and he puts it down there and like completely avoids what it
Yep.
actually is. Those are all cool. So there's cool parts of it, but I think out of the three movies, it's probably my least favorite. Number one stands like above and
Exactly.
beyond, and then it's 2 and 3, but it probably would be 1, 3, 2 if I had
Yeah.
to order them.
What I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the same thing as like I always would joke with people about like the original Austin Powers, and then the first sequel was the exact same movie again with different people. I like it. I'll watch it if it's on, but the first one still, and that's how it, like the Iron Man thing totally feels to me too.
It feels like at the very beginning they didn't know really what they were doing yet, and it was like they knew it. They kind of figured out, oh, we have a blueprint for it. Let's just go with that blueprint. But then
Yep.
realized that a lot of us didn't want that blueprint. We wanted a variation of their
Yep.
storyline, and that's kind of what we got in 3, a little bit because the villain wasn't a duplicate of that. There was a connectivity to him. There was still the storyline that go back to Switzerland and
Yep.
meets, Killian Aldrich from AIM back there, and it's his villain that is a villain also. That's the other part about it is if they didn't announce who Tony Stark was in number 1, if he wasn't like I am Iron Man,
Yep.
the movies 2 and 3 would never have existed because the villains
Oh, no.
in both those movies are connected to Tony Stark, not Iron Man. Like
Yep.
Iron Man themselves, neither one of those people have a problem with Iron Man. They have a problem with Tony Stark or Tony Stark's family.
Yep.
And so that only made those 2 movies exist because of the fact that people knew who Iron Man was. We would have had completely different movies for 2 and 3 if
Yep.
we didn't know who Iron Man was.
Well, and that's what we were saying back at the beginning. It's just you waste so much time managing a character who's hiding their identity, especially when the other identity is so high profile. Like,
yes,
that's all you're going to do forever. And like you said, look at Batman. Like, the formula doesn't change a whole lot.
And I guess,
So,
but it proves why Peter Parker wants to keep his identity secret in the MCU. It proves because in movie 3, someone actually attacks Tony Stark's home. I mean, that's Tony Stark's fault because he told him where he lived. But he attacks Tony Stark's home and hurts. Was it? Yeah, that was that one movie.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of. They're all blending together now.
Yep.
Tony Stark's home. Happy Hogan gets injured, but that's not because of the connection to Tony Stark. It's just because he was trying to, but that the Happy Hogan joke where Tony Stark picks the phone up and he looks and he's so close to the camera and he goes, "Hello, forehead of security."
Yep.
Every time I laugh way too hard at that joke, and it shows like the older people not knowing how to use social media.
Oh yeah. Well, or the flip. He's like, flip the camera. He's trying just flip and he's like, I'm not a brilliant tech genius like you, Tony.
Which is funny because Taylor and I, again, we watched Chef, and on Chef, he learns how to use Twitter. And so it was kind of the funny thing about the older generation trying to use modern technology. It doesn't always work. And he's like, flip the screen around. Hello, forehead of security. And then when he goes in the hospital, he gets injured and he goes in the hospital and someone says, make sure people are wearing badges. He has kind of an anal thing about badges. Yep. And the lady's like, what? But yeah, so his acting is freaking hilarious. I love it. I think he's a smart man. Jon Favreau can direct, he can produce, he can write, he can act. He's the golden boy for Marvel/Disney right now, for sure. Because he's done some amazing projects, including Mandalorian, a couple of the live action, quote unquote, live action remakes of Disney movies, the Iron Man movies, the Happy Hogan stuff. Like he's just like the golden boy for Disney right now, which is awesome. He's made them. I mean, his resume must have billions of dollars on it. So billions of dollars on it. And my phone's on Do Not Disturb, and I still got a phone call ringing. That was weird. It vibrated.
Must be very important.
Quick question for you.
Okay, yeah.
As we're getting into the Christmas season, is this a Christmas movie? Number 3.
Oh man.
It's one of those things. It takes part during Christmas. Okay. And at the very end of the movie, when he does the whole Project Clean or whatever it's called, he calls it something. Clean slate. He goes, hell, it's Christmas. And he goes, all the fireworks. So I'm like, in some of those things, it's the same thing to Die Hard, where Die Hard just basically happens during Christmas. My whole argument is Home Alone just happens during Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like the theme it could happen during Halloween. It could have happened during the summertime. It happened to happen during Christmas, and that's why it's Christmas.
I feel like I didn't even barely notice that it took place during Christmas, though, and that's the problem.
Well, Die Hard either, though.
That's
I
true.
love
It's
that.
just the Christmas party.
I consider
Yep.
Die Hard as a Christmas movie, but there's a Christmas tree at the beginning of this movie
Yep.
in his
That's
shop.
true.
So, and then he says the Christmas line at the end. So,
Yep.
to me is borderline, but it's a Christmas superhero movie if you want to say that.
I think that works. Yeah, I think that works.
In the superhero world, it's a Christmas movie, right?
Yeah.
Again, casting, home run, like Guy Pearce,
Yeah.
amazing. Ben Kingsley, dude, that was one of the
Yeah.
best reveals in a movie in a long
Oh,
time
yeah.
for me at the time. Where they're like, this guy is acting so badass, like he's in those clips. The what would you call it? Subliminal messaging kind of clips at the very beginning of those 10
Yep.
Rings things, where it's like cars on fire and people screaming and all that stuff, and you're just
Yep.
like, oh my god, this is so unsettling. And then he'd come and talk like this, and he's like, the president, you know, listen to me right now. And then you find out he's this British actor who likes to watch soccer, drink beer, and sleep with women.
Yeah,
like,
who had a drug problem, and that's how they
Yes.
got him on board. Was
it's
they were
so
like, oh, they helped
perfect.
you quit drugs, and you kind of get no, they provide him with drugs.
It's so perfect. Oh no, they gave me more in a boat.
Yeah.
And I love it. He goes, "Don't go in there for 20 minutes." And he goes, Tony Stark's like, "Okay, come on, get in the bathroom." And you can hear them in the background, like, "Oh my god, it stinks in here."
I actually know I love Ben Kingsley. I really wish that he'd had a bigger role, because I think but no, he did that part great. Have you watched that short that's on Disney Plus?
Yes. But I will say too, and Adam and I have yet to watch Shang-Chi, because our goal is to do it when it comes on Disney Plus. So supposedly he's in Shang-Chi as well, because the 10 Rings is part of Shang-Chi. And so he's actually, it's probably obviously he's the actor Travis Slattery.
Yep.
But he's not obviously the Mandarin, because obviously the Mandarin wasn't, it was by Guy Pearce in this movie.
Right.
But yeah, it's just really crazy. It was like in the very beginning, he looked the part, you like, this guy's an awful person. This is amazing. Unbelievable. And you find out he's just a stupid stage actor, and you know, that he actually has no problem with any, all the props are there. And he's like, where the women, oh, you fancy one of the prods?
Yeah.
It's like, no, where's the Mandarin?
No, that was a really good twist in the story. And like I said, that's when like you really start seeing that stuff start clicking. I think in Marvel is like you get these really unique ways of turning the story and in unexpected ways. And then what's brilliant is, like you said, we're still probably not done with Ben Kingsley, which is awesome to see how that'll turn out. I liked Guy Pearce a lot in that role. Again, I feel like I didn't actually see that much of him.
No. But I will say that I don't want to try to butcher her name again. I'm going to say Stephanie is her name, because that's the actress's name. She wasn't a home run to me. I think she was kind of awkward. But Ben Kingsley was really good. Guy Pearce, I thought, was pretty good for the character. I think he played that transition from the nerdy guy with the ponytail and bad teeth at the very beginning to the character he became as a billionaire, to the point where Gwyneth Paltrow, that Happy would have this, he's kind of the guy hitting on Gwyneth Paltrow kind of thing, and she wouldn't immediately be like, oh, that she actually was kind of attracted to him in a sense in the movie, having that connection. But the twist, obviously, of having the woman, Stephanie, whatever, I forget her name is, the botanist, become is actually a bad person in a sense as well. I think the idea of killing people without consequence, like killing people that are part of the main story, like when Guy Pearce just turned around and shot her in that cave or the dungeon area or whatever, that she was part of the main storyline at one point, and then she's just gone. She was like, okay, we don't need her anymore. And I like that aspect, because a lot of times too many people survive to the end in some movies, and having her just be gone, it was like, okay, her storyline's done. She's done. Because I didn't expect that. When I first saw this movie, he just turned around and shot her. I was like, that's not going to happen. And then he shot her. I was like, oh, he's dead. Okay, cool. Moving on. Tony Stark's comedy. I think that's one thing that Marvel's been able to do with all of their movies, is to have, my biggest thing when I explained it to people about like Thor Ragnarok or Guardians of the Galaxy, or any of their Marvel movies really, is that the Marvel way, and to know that not everything about every movie needs to be serious. If it's a serious or drama movie or action movie, that even if you and I I mean, think about that. That movie takes over the span of a couple of weeks, probably, right?
Yep.
The actual movie itself. Like in a couple of weeks, one of these times, even if we're in a very, 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 very serious time in our lives, we're going to crack a joke. I mean, Adam,
Yep.
you and I are the kind of people that would go to a funeral and to make things lighter would have a joke with each other. Not in an
Been there,
inappropriate
done that.
way, not out loud,
Yep.
not like to make the whole place light up in laughter, but the kind of things to relieve some tensions to say a joke. And I think one of the things that
Yeah.
Marvel's always been able to do is that they've been able to have some lighthearted moments and tell some jokes during some serious
They
moments.
have from the
And
beginning, which
yeah,
is impressive. And like, but yeah, you're spot because that's the thing. It's a different, like, dark and brooding is, it's hard to keep doing. And like we said
yes.
with like we already know, we feel like we're always crapping on Batman, and I enjoy Batman comics, but like they're really dark. Like it
Mhm.
just never, there's never and like even for me, those movies were funny, but like we've talked about, Thor Ragnarok was when I was like, that's when I was 100% in for the new movies. Like I liked them up to that point. I liked the humor, but when I saw it done like that, I was like, yeah, this is awesome. So yeah, so I think you do look back and see in Iron Man 3 that the humor is
Like when
there
he's attached
already.
to the bed frame thing, he's up there and he's like, yo, 1, 2, 3. And he does that thing and they're all like, oh, look at that happen. And all of a sudden, finally it
Yep.
happens. It's like that's kind of thing that is the same kind of joke at the beginning of Thor Ragnarok when he's spinning around and he's like, hold on
Yes.
1 second. Yeah, okay. And he starts talking to him. Like that's like the same kind of joke.
Yep.
That's just kind of funny. It's like in the moment, nothing works perfectly, but he rolls with the punches. Like it's not working the way he wants it to work. And it
Right.
finally happens, and only one of them hits him, and he realizes that the rest of them are still in that garage. That point is a
Yep.
great transition to talk to. Is Adam and I only talked once during our rewatch of this movie via text to talk about the rewatching of these
I've
movies.
been waiting
And
for
the
this. Yeah.
one thing that we talked about is the weirdness and the very weird part about the kid. Like where in the storyline, where in the writer's room, who was writing this screenplay? His name is Shane Black.
Yep.
Yeah, Shane Black is the guy who directed and wrote the screenplay for movie 3. Did the kid have anything to do with it? I understand like some
Yeah.
of the things, like he couldn't have interacted the same way with an adult. I don't think it wouldn't have been the same end result, but it just was weird. I don't know. It just seemed weird that the kid was by itself and no one was around with him. He was just hanging out. It's a very like creepy thing, honestly.
Well, that was what I texted you. I was like, this story is kind of creepy because I'm watching, like, he's just like, hey kid, I'm in the shop by your, that I guess his dad or
Yeah.
somebody works at, and he's, but like, get these things for me.
And
And
like
then like,
make me a sandwich. And like
make me a sandwich. And
he goes to town with the kid. Like the kid
yep.
like they go to town together. That's like that kid, Tony Stark would have been arrested.
That's all I kept thinking the whole time was, in this small town, in this very rural small town, he's walking around downtown with this kid at night. They're hanging out at the memorial where the guy smoked everybody.
Yeah.
And then like the kid wants a ride and he's like making fun of the kid. And I'm just like, all of this is not appropriate, Tony.
No. But like, but then I look back and I go, obviously it has to be like that. Because if it was, say, you stumbled upon Tony Stark at your garage, and you'd be like, get the hell out of here. If he made you feel anxious and have a panic attack, you'd punch him. So like, it's like you have to make it so this innocent kid, so that the storyline has to be like that. But I just feel like it just pushed it a little too far. Like there was just too much traveling with the kid and doing these with the kids. I'm surprised the kid didn't get in the car and drive to Miami with them. Like that's the point where he was like getting in, he was driving the car to Miami. I'm like, oh, the kid didn't go with him. Why not? That's really weird. And then all of a sudden, I know where he buys all that shit for him in the garage, and like no one questions it. Like obviously we don't see past that, but the mom's not like, where'd all this shit come from? Who's the mechanic?
And I get that
we're
a
therapist
like
now.
Exactly, to like what Tony goes through. But yeah,
Correct.
I'm also like, you're asking a lot of questions about like his dad who died and his mom who's off at work. Like it's, yeah. I mean, I would say it's all poor decision making, but it tracks also with
But
what
like, what do you say? Where are your parents, or who's home? And like why are you asking where his parents are? Like, do you want to know? You glad they're not home, or like what's going on right now? And I love the line though. It's pretty funny when the kid goes, "My mom's went to work and my dad went out to get cigarettes and hasn't come back, but that was 5 years ago, so I don't think he's coming back." And I was just like, that was great. It wasn't like my dad went away and is not around. It was like telling him that the beginning part of that story was his dad just left, but actually it was 5 years ago that he left. And the whole picking on, like the bullying thing was kind of cool. It was a kind of cool storyline. Again, if he was an adult being bullied, it wouldn't be the same way. And so I understand that part of it. But when Adam texted me, it was like, yes, I agree. It was this weird part where this kid was part of them. It was one of the main characters of that movie. And it was this weird interaction that was less weird when it was Spider-Man,
Yeah.
because Spider-Man is a teenager. Like he's older.
Oh, although
You know
it
what I mean?
does show a disturbing trend of Tony Stark liking to meet and groom
Little kids.
little kids.
That yeah. The one that I did, the thing I realized when, so speaking of Tennessee, when he goes to Tennessee
Yep.
and he goes, Jarvis, open the suit, and he opens the suit. He goes, oh, it's kind of brisk. And he's like, he wants to like lay back in the suit, and he's like, I think I'm gonna go to sleep now. And he's like, oh God, it's cold. Was the when he records the message over the Stark servers or whatever to everything, I think I don't know if it's planned that way for Endgame, but it kind of gave me way back. It goes fast forward to the last movie of Phase 3. It's
Yep.
kind of a callback because he does the exact same thing
Yep.
in Endgame by speaking into the helmet just in case he didn't survive to
Yep.
Pepper that
It's
he
true.
did in this movie. And so that was kind of cool, little like homage back and forth, if that's what it was. That was kind of cool. I like that part, which is really like kind of like, again, they call back to each other, the connect the
Yep.
movies in a way that's not really connected. That was a big thing for me. The last big positive thing, I think, for movie 3, and again, I think we talked about this during our Squid Game review, that supposedly the music for the movie was really good. But I don't
Yep.
like all the things we can remember during Squid Game was the music that when the games started, that music that played,
Right.
and then maybe the music to open the show. In Iron Man 3, the movie music was amazing. Like every time something would happen, it would like it had this great
Yep.
music. I can picture it in my head right now that I didn't
Yep.
remember in movie 1 and 2. I mean, obviously, movie 1 you had the Iron Man at the very end, the I am Iron Man thing.
Yep.
But I think it wasn't until 3 there was actually like an Iron Man theme song that when something good happened, when he was getting the suit on,
Right.
when
Yep.
action was starting, and it's Brian Tyler, and that's probably part of it. The first 2 movies were scored by someone I don't know, and Brian Tyler is a very famous scoring music person for movies.
Yep.
And so like him having a part of that movie 3, I think either the music was really good in movie 1 and 2, so I didn't notice it was there, or it was really good in 3, so I did notice it was there. I mentioned that to Taylor when we were watching. I'm like, the music in this movie is much better than the first 2 movies. So I will say that's one of the big positives of 3.
I wonder if that's where, like, as they're seeing the success of, because that Iron Man 3's post Avengers too,
yes,
right?
It's the first movie in Phase 2.
I feel like that's where the big Disney money starts flowing in. So now they can get like world-class composers and
speaking of that, I think one of the things I was thinking about is that the first 2 movies made like just under 600 million and just over 600 million, and then movie 3 doubled that.
Yeah.
Movie 3 came out on the heels of Avengers.
Exactly.
And so Avengers did so well and so amazing that it's like, even if you didn't know what the hell was going on, you saw Avengers, you went and saw Iron Man 3 because of that. So I feel like if Avengers, if Iron Man 3 would have been the last movie before Avengers of Phase 1, it might have only made $600 million as well.
Yep.
But at the heels of Endgame, Avengers made it make all of that money.
And actually tying, to Avengers, one of the points I thought of when I watched it was, and again, I think this is maybe when you start seeing the writing and that, like you said, the humor even starts getting more nuanced. I didn't really think about it until I would rewound it and watched it again, but they do the whole thing of where he's suffering from PTSD, which, could be from what happened in Afghanistan, but they also make it that just seeing the wormhole, seeing, gods from another realm, like completely breaks his brain, which I just wanted to say, I thought was a really smart writing thing that people don't ever do in movies, is to stop for 1 second and say, if you even saw this, your mind would melt for a while. So I thought addressing that as something that he was really struggling with was smart writing.
Which is one of the things, like I say, that happens really well with Marvel things. It's the Peter Parker dealing with high school problems.
Exactly.
It's the there's the whole storyline in comic books of Tony Stark dealing with alcoholism. There's this
Yep.
we're gonna deal with real problems. I'm not saying DC or any of these other companies don't do it, because I mean in DC there's covers of people getting shoot up with what's his name, Green Lantern. Is it Green Lantern or Green Hornet? One of the two. Green Lantern. His sidekick is addicted to heroin, and it's like, okay, they're dealing with a real world problem. And in this, PTSD or stress, anxiety, panic attacks is something that we all deal with. I currently deal with it right now, and so all of that is a real world thing, that just because he's a billionaire superhero doesn't mean that he doesn't deal with it. And so I love that. I mean, we just finished, I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but we just finished Ted Lasso season 2, and he deals with PTSD, or not PTSD, but panic attacks and anxiety in that show. And it's like, they deal with it, and they talk about it in sports and so on. And so, like, just because he's a billionaire superhero does not mean he doesn't deal with anxiety. And seeing that, and seeing people almost die in New York City being attacked and all that stuff, he just suffers from it. And the kid just gets under his nerves. Is this too much? Is this too much? You need to tell me to stop. And he's like, will you shut up?
But yeah, so I thought that was smart writing for his character, because I don't think we often acknowledge that, like, just seeing a portal to another dimension would probably affect you heavily.
Yeah, and he has to go on fighting crime still. He has to go on being that superhero anymore. He can't step back and just say, I'm not doing this anymore. He's now, and people know Tony Stark and Iron Man are one and the same. And if problems happen in the world, he needs to do something about it. And he can't just hang his cleats up. He has to continue fighting. Exactly. And so the other big problem, and we talked about it with the second movie, which is the drones versus suits and all that stuff, is the fact that he doesn't need to be in the suits anymore for them to actually fight crime. And then it leads me to believe, then why does he need to be in the suits anymore? Like, why does he have to be in Iron anymore if he can just create these drones that can fight for him? And so that kind of storyline towards the end kind of broke down for me. Like, I don't like the fact that there's 7,000 different versions of a suit that can fight on his own.
One thing I thought was interesting, a callback to the first one, is when Colonel Rhodes is training the pilots.
Yes.
He is lecturing them about why having a human behind the machine is crucially important, because it can make in the moment decisions. So I just thought that was like, they're still dealing with that question in Iron Man 3 about, if he isn't in the suit, is it just another weapon then?
Yes.
Like,
and so it was really weird. What I did say, that one of the cool things I liked was seeing Tony Stark jump from suit to suit was kind of cool, though.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't like all the suits, but like see him just jump up in the air and the suit attached to him in a way and fight and stuff like that. And like, that was kind of cool. But yeah, the whole, not being able to need to be in the suit. I do like the act where he can like pretend like he's in the suit, like VR almost. But like, the suits were just interacting on their own. Like, Jarvis was basically Iron Man at that time.
I was about to say, Jarvis is becoming
really Iron Man. Well, he's really Iron Man, actually, right?
Yeah, he is.
I mean, even at the end, the shrapnel gets removed from his body. He doesn't need the arc reactor in his chest anymore. So is now Jarvis, or after Jarvis becomes Vision Friday, is they actually the Iron Man, not Tony Stark? I do love the joke. Oh, what is that? Mark 15, and he looks at the thing and it's marked 42. It's like, it's the same thing when you come home with another comic book and oh, did you get 2 comic books? Yeah. And you hide the other 3 comic books behind your back. I only got 2. That's all I got.
Yep.
The Mark 42 is really the 15th one. Yeah. What's that, Mark 15?
Yeah.
And their character, their relationship was awesome too. I love the back and forth on them. At the end, when she kicks ass and she kicks the little missile and Aldrich Killian and kills him. She goes, wow, that was violent. Like, she like snaps out of it for a second, like, holy smokes. And then he goes, why don't you dress like this at home? Or, the whole sports bra and everything. She's like, oh my God, I just killed someone. All you're worried about is what I look like.
Which is, I kind of wish she'd kept her superpowers. A superpowered, a mild one. I don't know. Maybe they couldn't. I don't remember the exact mechanics of how it worked. So maybe she couldn't keep them. But
he fixes her, but they don't actually touch on that, I don't think, in the MCU. Yeah. It's like he basically knows how to fix her, so he fixes her, but that's like behind the scenes. It's not part of anything. Yeah. And I think they needed her to go back to being normal. I think she needed to have that ability. They almost didn't need to do it in the movie. Like, did you really
Yep.
need to? Obviously he needed the push to save her, but if she wasn't injected with the stuff, he still would have wanted to save her. So, I mean, I
Right.
guess the storyline did have to have him freak out a kind of bit where he thought she died, and without the shot,
Which I guess it looks like there's a lot of potential to blow yourself up with that power. So maybe that's what he was worried
yes,
about.
yeah. I don't know. I just, that part was pretty funny when she's like, "Is everything gonna be okay?" And he's like, "Well, no, because you're in a relationship with me, so
Yep.
always bound for something to happen." Or no, like, "Are you still mad at me?" or something like that, And he's like, "You're in a relationship with me. You'll find something to complain to me about.
Yes.
Complain about me." All that stuff is, again, it's an admission of he's not a perfect person, and that he's working on it, but he's willing to work
Yep.
on it, kind of thing. And so, like, that whole storyline tracks, and I like that from movie 1 to 3. He's still
Yep.
trying to improve himself, but he doesn't know how to do it. Sometimes he's not always perfect at it. He wants to save the world, but he's not a perfect human being, and so he does what he can, and that's the whole, I think, Iron Man story.
Yeah.
So I think 1's the best. I like 3 and 2 are probably 2A and 2B. I mean, it's not like I didn't like 1 way more than the other. I just think that, like, each one of them has their
Yep.
own pieces. I will say that what gives 3 the edge to me a little bit is the fact that the villain isn't a copycat of him.
Agreed.
That would
Yep.
probably be the only thing, is that there's a villain, there's a big bad in it, but the big bad is something different, not the
Yep.
same as him.
And the big bad is tied to something bigger in that
Correct.
movie too. So,
and in a sense, it's the 10 rings that's tied to a bigger storyline as a whole in the thing.
Yes.
I mean, it's like we got Ironmonger and Jeff Bridges, and then he just dies, and that's it. That story, that whole, the first movie standalone, there is no real connectivity other than Iron Man and Gwyneth Paltrow in these other movies. Yinsen, that connection and stuff like that. But, like, there really doesn't, like, you don't really have to watch number 1 to get what's going on in number 2 and number 3, in a sense. And so, but yeah, I don't know. It just, that copycat part of it is weird to me. But otherwise, all the movies did well in the box office. Obviously, Robert Downey Jr. has been known now for history as being Tony Stark. We do look at Tony Stark. He's Iron Man. Iron Man is Tony Stark, which is Robert Downey Jr. And Happy Hogan was amazing. Gwyneth Paltrow was amazing. And then, obviously, like I said, the movie 2 with Justin Hammer was awesome. And I think my favorite character in movie 3 was Ben Kingsley.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I think it's been great. I think I'm glad they didn't try to do a 4th one. I think his 4th movies are all the different parts he's been put into the other movies. One of the things that Taylor and I talked about, like, we would have been fun to do, is instead of doing this, like, Iron Man 1, 2, and 3, to do Iron Man as a character and oversee his whole story arc of the first 3 phases. But then I'm like, that's an undertaking for Iron Man. Like, that's
a huge undertaking.
We could do it probably for, like, Samuel L. Jackson, maybe, because he's such a P character in all the different movies, or, like, specific other characters like Thor, because he's got his own movies. But he's at, like, but, like, Iron Man is in, like, he's in probably the second most behind Scarlett Johansson, because Scarlett Johansson's in this movie, and then, like, every other movie, and then her own movie.
So, I mean, I feel like that's why his end was so important in the MCU, is because you don't really, like, by the end, he really ties, like, the whole storyline together. So it feels like he needs to go and something new needs to, come in his place. So,
and I think that's why he needed to die.
Yeah,
I think some of the people, all the sadness about him dying and being like, "Oh, you can't kill Iron Man. He's been, like, the whole MCU." It's like, no, I think he needed to die to finish the storyline up. Like, you had to, like, put a cap on it, because if you didn't finish him, you know how easy it would have been for Marvel just to be like, "Oh, Tony Stark shows up in this," and Tony Stark shows up in this, and it's like
forever, for the rest of time. Exactly.
So kill him, and the only way you bring him back is if you have some sort of cameo where they're talking in a future film. They're in Doctor Strange 2, and they're doing a throwback. They're like going back or thinking back in time at something, and Tony Stark's there. I can understand that as a secret, non-credited thing in a movie. But to have Tony Stark come back as Iron Man and actually fight crime and do all this stuff as a new future thing, you couldn't do. So just kill him and make the story, cap it off. And we mentioned the post-credit scenes, and that's why Endgame did not have a post-credit scene. It's because they wanted to say that was the end of what was going on prior. That's the end of the Tony Stark storyline. Something they need to do with freaking Luke Skywalker.
I'm starting to fear that's never going to happen. I feel like they put, like, I don't think they could have thrown more money at trying to just make that happen without doing anything. I still, the day we were texting each other on that Mandalorian, and I was like, that was neat, but like, I just suffered through that whole new trilogy and we're right back to Luke Skywalker again. Yeah. And now they don't even need him. They can just use his robot version.
Yes, exactly. Did you see that what's his face is coming back to play Anakin Skywalker in the new TV show? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I think
fun.
that's cool.
Yeah, I do think so. It's also redemption because I think he got a lot of shit too. I mean, there's a bunch of people got a lot of shit for the original
I think he
trilogy.
Was poorly directed.
Trilogy. Yes. Yep. So I think it's now with the money and the people they have behind these new shows, it's gonna be pretty cool to see what they do in the future. Yes. Star Wars, but back on the Marvel thing. Exactly. Well, technically, Marvel is part of the Marvel universe in a sense.
I know.
Right? Is the Star Wars universe a multiverse of the Marvel universe?
I hope so.
But what they'll use, they'll end up using freaking Luke Skywalker. That's it. They won't use anybody else.
Exactly. Luke Skywalker versus the return of Tony Stark.
Yeah. Well, they're like, we can use all these cool characters we haven't used yet. Let's just put Luke Skywalker in there. Come on, guys. Let's be
Mark
honest.
Hamill was joking the other day that since they do theoretically exist in the same universe, he said on Twitter, like, could a Jedi defeat Captain America or something? I forget it, about lightsabers and the shield. But I feel like the fact that Mark Hamill's talking about that and acknowledging that it's in the same multiverse is wild in and of itself.
I think we did our What If review. Now that they've done What If season 1, I don't think season 2 should have, but what if a special, not even part of the series, a What If special? What if the Star Wars universe interacted with the Marvel universe in a way, and see that,
and make it totally non-canon. This is just this is a story. And
it's fun. We're gonna put that out there just so you have it and do whatever with it. And it's a 45-hour long special feature thing that you see Luke Skywalker. And I'm okay with that. Luke Skywalker can come back. A bunch of other people can come back. Tony Stark, Captain America. Let's all see them gang up together and fight something else in the, like, either half the episode or maybe a 2-part thing. Half of it where Star Wars comes to Earth.
That'd be cool.
And does something. And then the other half is Captain America, Iron Man, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor. We all get on a ship and they go fight something in a galaxy far, far away.
Darth Vader versus Vision.
Oh, hell yeah, man. I'd do that. Ultron, Darth Vader, Ultron.
Oh,
Vision,
yeah.
All the villains
That'd
together.
That'd
be fucking awesome. Like, Ultron has to help Earth fight Darth Vader. He's actually not a villain for one episode. But that would be cool. So, but Iron Man kicked it all off, man. Iron Man was
it totally did
thing, and I'm so happy. They couldn't have done better with the casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. I think he definitely held that series along. I think Marvel, in the long run, they have paid him his due. I'll tell you that much. He has made enough money, but I think Marvel would not be as valuable, or Disney would not be as valuable as they are now if it wasn't for Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark.
It might not have made it, like you said. I just don't like. I keep thinking about Tom Cruise as Iron Man now, and I'm like, I don't even know that I would have gone and seen it. I could, like, that would have made me angry. So, like,
even better, man. Even better. We tweeted it out on our Capes and Tights Twitter and our Instagram and Facebook. At one point, Michael Jackson was trying to buy Marvel so that he could play Spider-Man. So, I mean, anything is possible. Anything is possible.
Tony Stark and him could hang out and share creeper notes.
Exactly. Tony Stark's hanging out at the what's this place called? His mansion.
Oh my! I don't even remember
now. I'm glad I don't remember, honestly. But I don't know what our next. I think our next review of the movies is something. I'm trying to see here, but I don't remember what it is, but we're going to do it again. I know what the plan might be is that, like, the next movie review, I think, is Shang-Chi after that comes out on Disney Plus.
Yep.
And then obviously some of the new movies like Eternals and things like that. But I believe we want to do when Spider-Man, I think is what it is. When Spider-Man comes out, the new Spider-Man is just to review Far From Home and Homecoming.
Yeah.
And then do the new one as well in that series. Those ones, I think, when we do those, people will probably do like an hour episode like we normally do, but like we'll do 15 minutes on the first movie, 15 minutes on the second movie, and just dive in for half an hour on the new movie, because the two movies have been out for so long. People have heard reviews. We're going to try to review the new movies as they come out. But I think that we've never done the reviews of the first movies. So I feel like if a new movie comes out that has previous movies, we need to talk about those for a little bit on those episodes.
I agree.
So, yeah. So check us out on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the good stuff for sure. Anything else, Adam?
No, I don't think so. If you haven't seen the Iron Man movies, go check them out. I mean,
they're all on Disney Plus.
Fun. All on Disney Plus. They're fun to rewatch. So,
and watching them 1, 2, and 3 works like we did. There's no issues with those at all. It just, if you wanted to get the real sense of it, I would say watch 1, and then you can skip Hulk. Honestly, I'll tell people that right now. Watch 1, watch 2, maybe watch the rest of Phase 1, like the Thor. Maybe you can skip Thor, but maybe here's the deal: watch 1, watch 2, watch the Avengers, watch 3, and you'll really get the entire encapsulation of what that is story arc is supposed to be.
Yeah,
because I do think
you're gonna miss a lot. You're going to miss a lot in 3 if you haven't watched Avengers.
You don't really get the PTSD and the whole thing, what's going on in the world and all this stuff, why he's dealing with, if you don't understand from watching the Avengers. So 1, 2 Avengers, and then 3 would probably be the way to do it. You know, and maybe if I do that again in the future, I'll probably do that too. But whatever. It's like watching watching Civil War and then watching Homecoming and Far From Home for the Spider-Man arc, because he gets introduced in Civil War.
Exactly.
So, cool. I guess until next time, we've been Capes and Tights, right, Adam?
That's it.
Okay, guys, we don't know how to end these things anymore, so we're just gonna kind of drift off into the future.
Yes, we're gonna talk awkwardly at each other. See y'all.
Yeah.